My name is Lila Bennett. I'm 35 years old. 2 weeks ago, I flew nearly 3,000 miles with a single gift wrapped in shimmering gold paper. Before I could even set it down, my mother looked me dead in the eye and said they hadn't invited me. My father shoved the box off the table in front of 60 guests. He said they didn't want anything from the daughter who abandoned them. I picked it up off the floor, turned around, and walked out without raising my voice. 3 days later, both of them drove 14 straight hours through the night to stand at my front door. They had a story about me, and the whole family had believed it for years. They just never asked who was holding my grandmother's hand when she took her last breath. What was inside that gold box is the reason they couldn't stay away. Welcome back to Frontline Retribution, the channel for quiet people who get pushed 1 inch too far, and the moment the truth finally walks through the front door. If you've ever been the one who showed up when nobody else was watching, this story is for you. Drop a comment and subscribe. I held that gold-wrapped box on my lap for the entire flight out of Seattle. 5 hours in the air, 2 layovers, and one miserable middle seat squeezed between a snoring businessman and a woman who kept elbowing me for the armrest. A flight attendant leaned over with a sympathetic smile and asked if I'd like to stow it overhead. "No, thank you," I said softly. "I'll keep it with me." It was surprisingly light for its size, yet it felt like the heaviest thing I'd ever carried. I work as a hospice nurse on the palliative care floor in a busy Seattle hospital. People come to us when there's nothing left to fix, only everything left to feel. My colleagues call me the steady one, the nurse who doesn't cry at the desk, who sits with families after the doctor delivers the news, who speaks the hard truths in the gentlest voice. When my charge nurse saw me requesting time off, she assumed it was a beach trip or a friend's wedding. "Somewhere sunny?" she asked. I just smiled. "I'm flying east to keep a promise." She waited for more details. I didn't offer any. I've gotten very good at sitting with what I'm not saying. It's half the job. The truth was, I hadn't been back to my family in 4 years. I wasn't returning for them. I was returning for someone who could no longer make the trip herself. Somewhere over the Rockies, I traced the gold ribbon with my thumb and thought about the woman who'd asked me to do this. I don't fly across the country for anniversary parties. I came to honour a promise to a dead woman, and I had no illusions about the welcome waiting on the other end. Whatever happened, I would set that box on the right table on the right night. That was all that mattered. Most people won't understand this part. I knew exactly what I was walking into. By then, my family had a name for me, the daughter who abandoned them. My sister Morgan said it at Thanksgivings I missed. My Aunt Vivian repeated it at church potlucks. My mother Diane had built an entire quiet narrative around it, and the congregation believed every word. I knew all of it before I bought the ticket. I bought it anyway. People assume that if your family treats you like a stranger, you must have crawled back begging for scraps. I wasn't begging. I had stopped speaking to them 4 years earlier deliberately, with my eyes wide open. The way you close a door you've decided never to slam again. I had built a life in Seattle, a job I was proud of, a small house with a slightly crooked porch that I loved anyway, and a loyal golden retriever named Biscuit who thinks he's basically a person. I didn't need their party. What I needed was to finish something my grandmother had started, and the only way to finish it was to show up in the one place I'd sworn I'd never return to. So I made myself 3 rules. I would not explain myself. I would not defend the 4 missing years. I would set the box where it belonged, say what I came to say, and leave before the cake was cut. No scenes. No speeches. You don't argue with people who already wrote the ending. I had a return flight booked for the next morning, and a window seat I actually wanted this time. The whole trip was supposed to take less than 24 hours. That was the plan. The party was at a waterfront resort in Wilmington, North Carolina, my sister Morgan's territory now. She doesn't do anything small. She'd booked the ballroom for the exact date of my parents' 40th anniversary. Glass doors opened onto the dunes. String lights twinkled overhead, white linen tablecloths, a four-piece band, and gold accents everywhere because someone had decided gold was the theme. The irony wasn't lost on me as I walked in carrying a box wrapped in that exact colour. 60 people. Faces I half recognised from a childhood that felt like it belonged to someone else. Morgan spotted me first. She crossed the floor in expensive heels, wearing the polished smile she reserves for difficult clients and family drama. She hugged me like I was a coat rack. "Lila," she said, "I honestly didn't think you'd show." Her hand stayed flat against my back, gently steering me toward the side of the room. I let her steer. I kept the box level against my chest. Behind her, the bright machinery of the evening hummed clinking glasses, laughter, a photographer circling like a shark. I scanned for the head table. That was where the box needed to go. Morgan followed my gaze and her smile thinned. "Whatever you're planning," she murmured, still smiling for the crowd, "don't do it here." I didn't answer. I kept walking. Morgan peeled off to handle a vendor issue. That's when I heard it, the conversation you're never meant to overhear. Two women by the bar. My Aunt Vivian leaning in with that particular hunger of someone who loves a tragic story. "That's her," Vivian said, not quite quietly enough. "The one who took off right when Diane's mother got sick. Left those poor people to handle everything alone." One woman glanced at me and looked away quickly. "After everything they did for that girl," the other murmured. I stood there, holding my grandmother's final gift, and let the words wash over me. I've learnt there's a version of you that lives in other people's mouths, and it rarely matches the version that did the actual work. In their story, Lila Bennett was selfish, cold, ungrateful. She abandoned a sick old woman and her aging parents. I could have corrected the record with 3 sentences. I didn't. Not because I couldn't, because what I carried belonged to someone who had asked me to deliver it a certain way, on a certain night. Tonight wasn't fully that night yet, so I kept my face calm and my grip steady. Let them talk. They'd been talking for 4 years. A few more minutes wouldn't change anything. Or so I thought. To understand any of this, you have to know my grandmother, Eleanor Nana Ellie, to me. For most of my childhood, she was the only steady wall in a house full of storms. My parents were busy in the way busy people use as an excuse. Morgan, 4 years older, had already launched into her own ambitious orbit. The summers belonged to Nana. Her farmhouse outside Logan, Utah, smelled of fresh bread, liniment, and old coats. She taught me to can peaches, mend fences, and stay calm when an animal was dying, skills that turned out to be perfect training for palliative care. She had a saying while we worked, half to me and half to the chickens: "You show up for the people who can't show up for themselves anymore." She wore a thin gold wedding band she never removed, not for kneading dough. Not even when her knuckles swelled in the cold. As a little girl, I'd spin it around her finger while she read to me. That ring became one of the reasons I became who I am. I watched her hold 100 hard things gently. When life got loud, her voice always flattened the noise. 6 years ago, Nana started slipping. Small things at first, a pot left on the burner, mixing up names. Then a fall that left her in a sling and fear in all of us. The family meeting happened at my parents' kitchen table. Morgan ran it like a corporate presentation. She'd done the math. The farmhouse was worth money. There was an affordable memory care facility nearby. Sell the house, place Nana there, use the proceeds to secure my parents' retirement. Practical, clean, my mother nodded along. My father studied the table. I sat with my coffee going cold and felt something stubborn rise inside me. I asked one question. Who's going to visit her? The table went quiet. Morgan said visits were sentimental and sentiment didn't pay nurses. In the back of my mind, I heard Nana's voice again. You show up for the people who can't show up for themselves. So I said the thing that would cost me the next 6 years of my life. I'll move back and take care of her myself. I was 29. I had a career, an apartment, and a man I thought I'd marry. Morgan laughed out loud and said I'd last a month. My mother told me not to be dramatic. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being my grandmother's granddaughter. A week later, I packed my car and drove east. Back in the ballroom, I let the memory settle and kept walking toward the head table. The band eased into a slow song. My parents sat there 40 years, married, raising glasses to a crowd that adored them. My mother looked elegant in a deep wine-coloured dress, silver hair pinned up. My father nodded beside her, jacket a little too big now. For one strange second, I felt the old pull of family, the 9-year-old girl who still wanted to be waved over to the good table. There was no chair for me. I hadn't expected one. I shifted the box to both hands and took the deep breath I use before walking into rooms where lives are about to change. My mother saw me at 15 feet. Her laugh died instantly. She set her glass down with careful precision. My father followed her gaze and froze. The first words my mother spoke to me in 4 years were not hello. What are you doing here? Not a question. A door slamming. I kept my voice low, and even the voice I use when panic wants to take over. I came to give you something from Nana. Then I'll go. Her chin lifted at the name. Something guilt, grief, irritation flickered across her face and vanished. Before I could set the box down, Morgan's hand landed on my arm. Her grip was firm, her smile bright for the room. Not here, she hissed. Guests were watching. The band kept playing, but a cold front had formed at the head table. Morgan turned to the crowd with effortless charm. Sorry, everyone, family being family. A few polite chuckles. Then she leaned in again. You're good at disappearing. Maybe do that now before you ruin Mum's night. I looked at her hand, then at my mother. I understood. Morgan had pushed hardest for the memory care facility. She needed the version where I was the selfish runaway and she was the practical hero. She'd told that story so long she believed it. Understanding didn't make it sting less. It just kept me from starting a war. I'm not staying, I said quietly. One thing to give Mum, then I'm gone. That seemed to scare her more than a fight would have. You should know what those years actually looked like, because the family never told it straight. 6 years ago, I gave notice at my Seattle hospital, broke my lease, and drove 1,200 miles to Nana's farmhouse with everything I owned in a hatchback. I moved into her life completely. I learned her medications, which floorboards creaked, how to lift her without hurting either of us. I learned the weight of dignity when the body betrays you. The first month, Morgan called twice to see if I'd quit. I hadn't. After that, the calls stopped. My mother visited once that first season, 40 minutes. Tears in the car. Gone. I watched her taillights from the porch and felt the shape of the coming years settle like snow. It cost me almost everything that wasn't Nana. The man I loved lasted 18 months of long distance before he found someone whose life had room for him. My career plateaued. My savings dwindled. Friendships faded because I kept cancelling. The work was brutal, bathing someone who once bathed you. Cleaning up what bodies do at the end while protecting their dignity. Holding a fork to lips that forgot how to close. Nights I cried on the bathroom floor so quietly I scared myself. But there were clear mornings when Nana would surface, call me by name and pat my hand. You don't abandon the people who can't say thank you anymore. A month before she died, on one of her clearest afternoons, she asked for her cedar box. Inside was a sealed envelope addressed to my mother and her thin gold wedding band, removed for the first time I could remember. She pressed both into my hands. This goes to your mother, she said. Not at my funeral. Funerals make people too soft. On her 40th anniversary. You hear me? She made me repeat the date twice. I promised. I reached the head table as the band finished a song. The room quieted just enough. I set the gold box gently between my parents' place settings. "Happy anniversary," I said evenly. "This is from Nana." My mother stared at it like it might explode. She didn't touch it. "We didn't invite you," she said, pitching her voice so the nearby tables could hear. "Your sister planned this." The words rippled outward. I didn't flinch. "I know. I didn't come for the party." I nudged the box closer. "Nana asked me to give this to you today." My father stood. Before he could act, Morgan tried to steer me away. Then my father spoke the voice I remembered from childhood before something broke. "We don't want anything from the daughter who abandoned us." He swept the box off the table. It hit the floor. The lid popped open. The thin gold ring rolled slowly across the polished hardwood, catching the lights, spinning like a coin before it stopped. The room froze. Old Ruth Callaway Nana's dearest friend lowered herself to the floor with cracking knees and picked up the ring. She examined the inside of the band, then looked straight at my mother. "Carol Diane," she said, voice shaking but carrying. "That's your mother's wedding band. Eleanor's ring." The silence changed. 60 people recalculating. I knelt, gathered the spilled tissue and the sealed envelope, and stood again. I placed the ring back inside the box with deliberate care while the entire room watched. "She wanted you to have this tonight," I told my mother. "Of all nights, she chose this one. You just won't get to throw it on the floor twice." I turned and walked the long length of the ballroom, past every staring face, past the silent band, and pushed open the glass doors into the salt air. What happened next in that room, I learned later from Ruth and my cousin Maddie. Ruth didn't let the moment pass. She told the entire room the truth they'd never asked for, how she visited the farmhouse month after month, how she watched me care for Nana alone, how she never once saw my mother or Morgan there during the hardest years. "That girl gave up her whole life for your mother," Ruth said, pointing toward the doors while the rest of you sent flowers. "And you just threw her grandmother's ring on the floor." My mother sat down hard. The story they'd built for 4 years cracked open in public. I mailed the letter from a shipping store near the highway, keeping the ring to deliver in person if needed. The letter reached the farmhouse 2 days later. 3 pages in Nana's shaky handwriting. She had known about the family meeting, the plan to sell the house, the fear that kept them away. She forgave the fear. But she wrote about me, the granddaughter who stayed, who gave up marriage, career, youth, without asking for thanks. She reminded my mother, "You don't abandon the people who can't say thank you anymore." Lila never did. The ring and the date were chosen deliberately so my mother would remember, on the day she started her own family, that families are held together by who shows up when it's ugly, not when there's cake. My mother fell apart at that kitchen table. Morgan arrived for damage control and walked into a truth no story could fix. My father read it and sat on the back porch with his face in his hands. 3 days after the party, they drove 14 hours straight to my door in Seattle. I opened the door to find them grey-faced and exhausted, my mother clutching the taped-up gold box. Biscuit wagged his tail like a traitor. "You drove 14 hours, I said." My mother nodded, tears in her eyes. "That's the first time anyone in this family crossed a state line for me," I told them. "It only took my whole life. I let them in." We sat on my crooked porch in the fading light. I didn't forgive them that night. Forgiveness isn't handed over because someone is tired and sorry. It's built board by board. But I gave them one condition. The story stops now. They would correct the record with everyone starting with Vivian, starting with the 60 guests. My mother wears the ring now. She volunteers at a hospice near Logan. She calls on Sundays, and mostly I answer on my terms. Morgan and I aren't close and may never be, but the family sees her differently now. Aunt Vivian's storytelling career ended that night. My father wrote me a letter a month later. I haven't answered yet, but I haven't thrown it away either. I learnt something in those 6 years, and that one ballroom I'll carry forever. The people who do the quiet, ugly, unglamorous work almost never get thanked, while it would still mean something. So you don't do it for the thanks. You do it so that when the truth finally walks across the room, you can stand in the middle of it without flinching. That's my story. One gold box, one letter my mother couldn't throw away twice, and 14 hours of road that proved more than 40 years of words ever did. If this reminded you of someone quietly holding a hand no one else will hold, send them this video and tell them you see them. If you believe showing up matters more than getting the credit, drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.